This is Somebody's Wife, Somebody's Mum with Anastasia Jade. Welcome back to my podcast. Welcome to episode 2. Today's episode is going to be about the newborn stage. This is a stage that I would say nobody really told me about. So I'm going to fill you in. I'm calling this episode Groundhog Day, and that is because that is exactly how I would describe this newborn phase. So if you don't know what Groundhog Day is, it's essentially the feeling of living through the same day every day for an extended period of time. If you know the movie, then you know that every day was literally the same, to the extent that the main character could literally predict what was going to happen, when, where, and how, because he had lived that day before. This is what the newborn stage is like. And I really did not expect this. So I want to paint a picture for you of what my level of help was like during my newborn stage. Because I think this situation completely depends on who you have around you and the support that you have around you when you first give birth. So for me, I would say that my husband and I are building our village. You know when they say it takes a village to raise a child. At the moment, it's just my husband and I. We have my mum, but she works full time. We have my husband's auntie who works from home. So whenever she offers to look after our child, it's very much while she's working from home. It's not her free time. So it's really just my husband and I when it comes to the day-to-day. When my daughter was born, my mum stayed for a few days, and it was so tight for me to the extent that I was saying to God, this baby needs to come on my due date, because my mum has booked time off specifically. And if she comes any later, I don't know how we're going to navigate this. Same thing with my husband. He had just started a new job, so he couldn't get paternity leave. It's just his manager at the time was really kind and said he could use it as annual leave, basically, or just like additional paid time off. And again, that was timed around my due date. So I said, Lord, this baby needs to come on her due date, because everyone has literally booked time off. And if she comes at any other time, I'm worried I'm not going to get any support. So when my daughter was born, like I said, my mum stayed for a few days. Then my husband's auntie came for one night, and that was amazing. She took our newborn into her room, into our spare room, and only brought her in when she needed a feed, and that was great. And then another auntie of my husband's came for a few hours one day to show me how to bathe our daughter in a safe way, and also just to give me some company, because that, I believe, was the first day that my husband went back to work, and so I would have been home alone for the first time with our newborn. And this was all in the space of 2 weeks. After that, I was then basically alone with our newborn for a lot of the time. And what that meant for me is it caused me to really get with the program real quick. It caused me to grow up real quick, and it caused me to really dig deep into myself and find the natural mothering instinct that God put within me, and to let that manifest, because it was either me or it was me. I had to look after this baby. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no one around me. So I had to get with the program real quick, understand my baby quickly, and get into a routine that would allow me to have some control and less anxiety. Because something I really didn't anticipate was the anxiety that comes with your postpartum mindset. Definitely had anxiety. Definitely felt anxious that I was not adequate to look after her properly alone. I felt very scared. I don't know if you were ever scared to be home alone when you were younger, but that fear was what I felt. That anxiety was what I felt in my very early stages of motherhood. I just felt, what if she cries uncontrollably and I can't console her, and I can't pass her to someone else to help me? And I call this season Groundhog Day, because you wake up to serve your baby. Your life revolves around them. They need you. They need you. They don't want you, or they don't just want you. They literally need you. And often this is called the fourth trimester, where the baby is essentially still in that clingy womb mindset, but now they're outside of the body. But they still need you and they still cling to you, and you're still everything to them. You are still life to them, safety to them, protection to them. And so this is what the first 3 months of motherhood can feel like. Groundhog Day. And so this is also around this phase when your baby is waking up for a very short amount of time. I think like half an hour max, and then they go back to sleep. And so it's easier in that sense of you don't have to entertain them, or you can't really entertain them, because you just need to feed them, change them, put them to sleep. And then their eyes begin to open, and that's when you can start to engage with them a bit. But then the wake windows, which is the period that a baby is awake for, is still quite short. So then, they go back to sleep. And you're changing nappies essentially every time they wake up, just to make sure that they're awake. But also it helps you to really track their bowel and fluid movements. But your life in this moment, in these first 3 months, is just baby, 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 baby. It is Groundhog Day. And if you're like me and you didn't necessarily have a village, those 3 months are going to be spent on the sofa doing a lot of contact naps, a lot of carrying baby around to do things. I remember one day sitting on the sofa and just thinking, wait, how long is this going to go on for? At the time, which I still do, I had a mentor, shout out to Demi, that was mentoring me in my graphic design. And in this mentoring, he's also giving me homework. And I just couldn't bring myself to get anything done. And I just thought, wait, I need to get my life back, or at least some version of what I used to do, what I like doing. I need to get that back, because right now it's just me on this sofa holding this baby and I'm not doing anything else. And there's 2 angles to look at this. Number 1, motherhood is such an important role. It is so important. Nothing can compare to it. It's so needed. You as a mum, you are so essential. Motherhood is so important, just like fatherhood is so important. But of course, I'm a mum, so I'm speaking about motherhood here. So you should not feel bad at all if all you do today is hold your child. That's fine. That's needed. If all you do today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the year is hold your baby, that's fine. Your child needs you. And there will be a time when your child will no longer want to be held like a baby, and you will wish that you had those moments back again. And the second angle is, I need to look after my child, but I also don't want to lose myself. And I touched on this in my last podcast, where when mums step into motherhood, they often feel a sense of loss, an almost mourning of their former self, the things they used to like, the things they used to spend their time doing, because suddenly in this 4th trimester, your life revolves around your baby. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I came to a point where I decided I would like to revert back to myself. I would like to once again do the things that gave me excitement, which for me was design, graphic design. So eventually I got back onto my mentoring after taking a break, and I was able to give myself something else to look forward to, something to break up Groundhog Day. And this is something that I'm still trying to figure out right now. When you have a child, when you have a baby, I can only speak of the baby phase because I'm not in the toddler phase yet. But when you have a baby, your day is broken up into windows. So I try to plan my day in windows. When my daughter was a lot younger, that was a lot easier because she was maybe awake for 1 to 2 hours and then asleep for the same. Now she's awake for 2 to 3 hours, mainly 3 to 4 hours to be honest, and then asleep for 30 minutes to 2 hours. 2 hours is like hallelujah, a hallelujah. So for me, in this newborn stage, when it was time for me to break out of Groundhog Day, I had to try and get things done in the wake windows or in the sleep windows. So some people will say, try to sleep when the baby is sleeping. Some people will say, when the baby is sleeping, just rest. Some people will say, when the baby is sleeping, use that time to get things done. Whatever works for you is whatever works for you. But I will say, if you do not have help around you constantly or consistently, realistically, you won't be able to sleep when the baby's sleeping, or you won't feel like you can. I don't know what it is. It's essential because you're not getting sleep. When your baby is a newborn, your sleep is fragmented throughout the day. It's not like your baby is waking up every 2 hours in the night and then they're just sleeping throughout the day. Oh, no, no, no. In the 24-hour period, they are awake every 2 hours, just perpetually until they're a bit older and their wake windows get a bit longer. So you do need to find time to sleep. But for some reason, when the baby's sleeping, that's when you have the surge of energy to do anything else, something else. That's if you're not carrying your baby and doing what they call contact naps, which is just when you let your baby sleep on you. And also, you can't predict how long the baby will sleep for. So this is why I say, spend your time observing your baby. Observe your baby, watch your baby, understand their patterns, and work your way around that. I suppose it's also useful for people that have more support, but particularly for those that it's just you or it's just you and your partner. Understand your baby's patterns for the season that they are in and work your life around that. Does it work for you to clean when the baby is asleep? Are they able to sleep through the sound of hoovering and cooking? Does it work for you to clean when they're awake, but when they're asleep, you'll take a nap? Maybe for the first 2 naps of the baby's schedule, you would take naps with them. And maybe for the latter 2, you'll do some work. Or if you're normal and not like me, you'll just relax, watch some TV, have some personal time, develop a new skill. Remember who you were before you had your baby. It's completely okay that you may have lost a bit of yourself when you had your child. When you have a child, you'll see why mothers become so obsessed with motherhood and they become so obsessed with their children, because it requires all of them. You cannot half-ass motherhood. You cannot do it half-heartedly. This is a life we're talking about. This is a life. This is a person that you are raising, and it starts from birth. It starts from the womb. But that connection where you are able to teach them things and train them and show them things, that starts from when they're born. So it's completely okay that you might lose parts of yourself when you have a baby. When you feel ready to break out of Groundhog Day, remember who you were before you had your baby. And if you felt like you didn't have an identity before that, then find something. Because as important as it is to be invested in your family, that's your husband and your children, you also need to bring something to the table. Who are you? You are not just the mother, the wife, but you have a gift. There's something that you like. There's something that you're good at. There's something that makes your heart leap for joy. What is that? And how can you nurture that alongside being a mother? How can you bring that into motherhood? And how can you give yourself a healthy outlet that would allow you to function because you have someplace else for release? If we look at the Proverbs 31 woman, she had it going on. She was, selling clothes in the market. She had kids, but she was making money. She was doing something. She was pouring back into her family. What can you pour into your family from who you are, from your skills, from your passions? What can your children one day look at you and say, my mum is amazing at this? Or because my mum likes this, I want to go into this. And I also say this because there is a void that happens when you step into this Groundhog Day of the newborn phase. For me, I was basically looking for something that could help me to relax. And what I found was that when I was searching, I became vulnerable to addictive solutions. So my social media consumption has absolutely doubled or tripled since becoming a mum. And it's something I'm working on now, even. But I remember when I first gave birth, I didn't want to speak to anybody because I wanted that moment of alone time with my family and just knowing, okay, I've just given birth. Let me bask in this and come to terms with this new way of life. But I was on social media because I was looking for something to do. The moment it hit me that I was on it too much was when I was flicking through stories, and I think one of them, the time was like posted 1 second ago, and I was like, hey, I'm doing too much now. I was so bored. I was looking for something. And so this boredom steps in when your baby is asleep for the 1 to 2.5 hours that they may be asleep. And maybe you don't have much to do, or maybe you do have a lot to do, but you are nap trapped, which is essentially when your baby is asleep on you and obviously you can't move or they might wake up. So in these moments of downtime, that's when I found myself wondering what I can do with my time. And the default for most of us in this time, I feel, is social media. But it's just not healthy. It's just not healthy to have a pastime of simply watching people's lives and observing. And I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but I was thinking about this the other day. When you ask to follow someone on social media, what you are asking is permission to stalk their life. And social media gives you permission and access to someone's life. And I feel it makes people complacent because if you haven't spoken to someone for some time, but you see their posting or you see they've seen your posts, your stories, you assume they're okay, or you assume you don't need to reach out because they're clearly on their phone, they're clearly doing this. But see, in this example I've given you where I've just gave birth, but I was on social media looking for an escape, looking for a break, something to engage my mind. I was going through something. I was experiencing something, a life-altering event, a new season of my life, but I hadn't reached out to anyone. And then imagine now if my friends had thought, oh, she's okay. She's just watched my story. And to go back to this Groundhog Day season of motherhood, of the newborn stage, there's a lot that went on for me personally in those first 2 weeks. First of all, let me say, breastfeeding, when it's your first baby, obviously I don't know about the second time around, but the first time around, breastfeeding hurts. Breastfeeding hurts. I remember my sister-in-law said this to me when she gave birth. She was saying, breastfeeding hurts. No one tells you this. But I didn't think much of it, right? And this was a year or two before I was even pregnant. But the pain of breastfeeding for the first time after you've given birth, let me break this down for you. For me, breastfeeding hurt in two ways. The first way is the literal pain on the nipple. The pain, the pain, the pain. I remember explaining this to the health visitor. So a health visitor will come and see you periodically when you first give birth. I think for the first month or so, maybe first month or 2 months. And they're really great, really helpful, there to answer any questions. The first visit we had was the day after I had given birth. And I remember telling her that, it really hurts to breastfeed, thinking that maybe something was wrong or my daughter wasn't latching properly, when actually it's normal for breastfeeding to hurt. What's abnormal is if the pain is excruciating and if it goes on for longer than, I think, 2 weeks or so, the pain should get easier and it shouldn't last throughout the whole feed. That was the advice I was given. But that initial latch and those first few seconds of the feed, the health visitor literally described as a toe curling pain. Just to give you an image of what I mean when I say that breastfeeding hurt. The second way that breastfeeding hurt was that for the first maybe 2 or so days, breastfeeding was triggering my uterine contractions. So as I'm breastfeeding for the first time, after giving birth, after going through labor, I'm now experiencing contractions. Breastfeeding triggers contractions of the uterus. The pain. So I was literally breastfeeding my baby, and sometimes, some nights I was crying with pain. Bear in mind, I had a natural vaginal birth with no pain relief. I did not cry in labor with my baby. I did not cry pushing her out. I did not cry through those contractions. But this pain was different. And I remember even considering, should we switch to formula, because this pain is a lot. They always say breast is best, and it of course is. That's literally unique food you are creating for your child from your body. And I absolutely am in awe of how God created our bodies to connect with the babies we produce. Because if your baby is sick, your body will change the milk to produce healing properties. And as your baby grows, the nutrients and the ingredients, as it were, in your milk will change as your baby's developing. Your breast milk is tailored to your baby. It's a perfect temperature. It's got the perfect amount of whatever it needs. Breast is absolutely best, but nobody talks about the factors that could change whether or not you do decide to go through with breastfeeding. The pain of breastfeeding is a lot. I almost gave up many times. The reason I didn't was because the health visitors just kept applauding my daughter's growth and just how healthy she looked. And for me, I thought that's all I need. As long as she's eating well and this is doing what it's supposed to do for her, then I will continue and I will power through the pain. And I did. And there are solutions. There are some metal caps you can get for breastfeeding. There's nipple guards. There's nipple cream. There are some things that help. Nipple cream didn't help me. I didn't try the nipple guards, but some mums will really recommend those. The pain of breastfeeding is much, and I definitely almost gave up. And so let me take you further into this journey of the first 2 weeks of motherhood. So when my daughter was born, and we were taken to the place where they observe your baby before they send you home in the hospital. We only had to stay there for, I think, 12 hours? I think it was 12 hours to monitor her because she was born very close to the time frame where they would have potentially intervened as my water broke before my labor started. So this whole time we were there, my baby was sleeping. when she was showing signs of hunger, fed her, all of that stuff. We bring her home now and she's still sleeping. So she's sleeping this whole time, eyes are closed, she's resting. And I'm like, okay, so she's just going to sleep then, and I'm going to get some sleep. When I say we at this point, I mean my husband and my mum and myself. We get KFC and then we get ready to go to bed. I put my daughter down in her cot that we've got her. She's sleeping. I close my eyes. I hear crying. I'm like, oh no. I pick her up. I feed her. This is when the pain starts, the uterine contractions and the nipple pains. Bearing in mind, I have just given birth 12 hours ago, or more than 12 hours ago at this point. I wasn't in any pain. Like I said before, I had a pain-free birth. So then these pains, and I won't lie to you, the feeling of the uterine contractions gave me flashbacks to my labor. And although I had a really good labor experience and birth experience, I wasn't ready to feel that again. Though I look back on my birth experience fondly, I was not expecting to feel contractions again. They were not as severe as childbirth contractions, obviously, but they were way more severe than, let's say, period cramps. So there was that. And every time I put her down after she slept, she woke up. She kept waking up like every 2 seconds, basically. And so my husband and I, we literally looked at each other and we were like, what have we done? She would only sleep when she was being held. And it was so strange because it was like during the night, she won't sleep for more than 2 seconds if you put her down. Yet during the day, if I put her down, she'll sleep for an hour or two, almost 3 hours. So it was really strange. And my husband and I kind of figured that if we keep her on us, keep her warm and hold her, then we can get some sleep ourselves because she'll be able to sleep that way. So during these first 2 weeks, my husband and I camped out in our living room and almost did shifts of whoever she sleeps on, the other person will sleep near and make sure that we're sleeping safe. And yeah, basically sleep with her on us, sleep upright with her sleeping on us. That's what we did for the first 2 weeks. Sometimes we would bring in the mattress from the spare room, sleep on the floor, and literally we tried so many different ways of sleeping with her. It was like, looking back at it now, we really didn't see the end to this. And people kept telling us, oh, well, don't worry, it will get better when she gets older, it will get better. I can tell you, it does get better. You will sleep again. Your baby will sleep for longer, and your baby will be able to sleep by themselves. However long it takes is however long it takes, and when it's going to happen is when it's going to happen. You don't know when, but one night your baby will sleep well, and all the stress of the disrupted sleep will fade away. So that Groundhog Day season for me was sleep deprivation and just a lot of wearing my baby. In this newborn stage, they're really not awake for long. Then they go back to sleep, and that's your routine for the first 2 weeks. Leading up to the 3-month mark, their wake period gets a bit longer. That's when you begin to introduce all these play situations where you can show them black and white images and sensory things. But ultimately, this is when, for me, every day began to feel the same. And I just felt like, especially when you decide to let your baby sleep on you for every nap, you get trapped. I mean, that's why they call it nap trapped, right? Because when your baby is asleep on you, you can't move, you can't do anything. If you know your baby's going to sleep, you literally bring everything near to you. And that's when I kind of thought, okay, in this time of my baby sleeping on me, I'm not tired. I'm not going to sleep right now. What can I do? Of course, you can choose to rest. Of course, you can choose to have some phone calls, watch something. But I got to the stage where I wanted to do something else and I wanted to build something and do something for myself. And that's where, at around that 3-month mark, I decided I need to get back to my hobby, back to my skills, which for me was graphic design, illustration. That's when I decided to pick up my mentoring again, being mentored, that is, polish up my portfolio, because I thought, as much as I know I need to dedicate my time to this, I know that I can feel parts of me slipping away. And it got to the stage where I forgot how to do certain things. So I am a graphic designer, and it was things like when I started practicing some designs again, I forgot the shortcuts on the design apps, and I had to start Googling things again. And that's when I knew this is something I need to keep doing. So my advice to any new first-time mums or soon-to-be mums is keep some sort of essence of your hobbies, some sort of essence of your skills, whatever it is, stay in touch with it. For me, when I found out I was pregnant and I knew I'd be taking a year of maternity leave, my plan was to use the year to just build, focus on my design studio and to get better at my design skills, collect some more clients and work. And I didn't realize how much giving birth would take out of me. I didn't realize how much my life would just be sucked into motherhood. That in this first 3 months, it would be so hard for me to step away from looking after my baby, to focus on other things. So it took me a few months to mentally get to that place. And I'm not saying that I should have got there quicker. And I'm not saying that anybody should. But I think it's good to have an image of where you are, what you're doing, where you want to be. Don't lose the image. Even if you're not ready to start towards that yet, always maintain the image, or at least have some accountability. My mum was great in the early stages at making sure that I was working out and was getting back to design. I definitely made a lot of excuses for myself, but you have to find a way. You have to find a way, and you have to remember the image. And something that's helped me, particularly now, is understanding that when you have a child, your day or your life is in windows. So you have your window of when your baby is asleep. You have your window of when your baby is awake. It helps to consider the windows of your day and factor in the time allotted to those windows and see realistically what you're able to achieve. So I try to manage my day in those windows. No window is predictable. Some days will be better than others. Some windows will be longer or shorter than expected. But at least if you have a plan, then you know what you're working towards and you can start working towards that bigger picture. Another thing that I've learned is to manage my expectations. I think this is a big part of motherhood that has really helped me to stay sane. Manage your expectations. You might be losing your mind because you think she hasn't slept for 3 hours today. She hasn't slept for 2 hours today. With motherhood, it's going to sound so pessimistic, but I feel you have to plan for the worst. If I'm holding her, I know I can get at least 1 hour of sleep. Half an hour is my preparing for my worst. So what can I do in the half an hour that she's asleep? I can take a nap myself, or I can try and do half an hour of sending emails or something. Prepare for the worst, but celebrate the best. Manage your expectations and act accordingly and shift accordingly. If your baby's having a bad nap day, then plan for a bad nap day. I'll give another example of when I've taken my daughter out for a walk and she's fallen asleep, and I think, okay, if I get home and she stays asleep, that means I can do this, and this. Let's say I get home and as soon as I bring up the buggy, she wakes up. What does that mean? Do I have a meltdown? Or do I say, okay, she's awake, the plan needs to change now? These are the things that will help you to stay sane. Let your plans be loose. And I'm going to round off here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.